So let's look at the forms. So in my example, you can see that I have my forms in a folder under my project itself. And that's where BPM normally puts the forms itself. You also see I have a place where I have an XPDL where I have a page flow process. As I said before, files are versioned if you use something like Subversion or whatever the case may be. So versioning is on the file level. So you can see that I have an XPDL with my page flows. So again, you can have multiple XPDLs if you need to make it easier to work together as users. And of course, the forms are automatically saved in different files, so they can be lifecycled separately. Forms are created from the actual data model. So let's just quickly do one so that you can see. So I'm just going to right click, I'm going to say new form. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to make it embeddable, which means it is a reusable form. So I'm going to click on finish, and then I'm going to go to my data model, and I'm just going to drag a order onto that form. So you can see that it automatically generates a form from the attributes. Like I said before, that's why we actually create attributes with business readable names. So I'm just going to close that. I'm not going to save that for right now. So these forms in my forms project are embeddable forms, of course, and the reason I make them embeddable is that they can be reused. So this best practice that I use, I create a form for every one of the cases I created in my data model. So you can see I've got a note, so I can order a patient, a provider, and so forth. When you have a form and you test the preview it, this data.json file is generated for you, and that is some sample data that it creates for you to see what the actual form will look like when it's deployed. Page flows are processes that will be triggered when a user opens up an activity. When you have user tasks or activities that are executed as part of the process, normally that user task, when you open it up, opens up the form based on the data that is associated with it, and then the user changes the data and it saves it back. That's all good and well, and it works very well. What I love to do is when I create a process with a user task, I create a page flow. The page flow allows you to do many different things. First of all, what it allows you is to run a number of activities inside of that user task based on the data that you have available, based on the decisions that the user makes, and so forth. In my case, I use sub-processes to go and find the actual data as the user opens up the form. The reason I do that is if you create a user activity and you just assign data or parameters to that activity, when that work item is created, it sort of creates a copy of that data and it sends it to the work item. And it'll stay there until the user eventually opens up that activity. The problem with that is when the user gets to that work item only in 3 days, that data, in the case data model, might have changed because other people could have changed that data. So the data becomes stale. When I create a page flow, which I associated with a work item, it will go and find the data in the current state that it's at. So it means that the data that you present to the user on the form is current data. It is not stale data. In my case, what I do is I only send in a case ID into my page flow, and then I get the case ID and I go and search for the latest data in the case model, and then I do some initiation of data, and then I only present the data to a user. What I also like to do in my page flow, as you can see in my inner data, I like to actually do some logging. And this helps me to do debugging and development of my processes. Okay, so that's very handy. I've only created a sub-process and a script task, but what you could also do is you could actually write a REST service call that will go to an external application to go and get data that's not part of your BPM solution. And in reality, you're probably going to do that a lot because the data that we have in BPM shouldn't be the data that makes up the solution, unless you have a small implementation where everything is in the process, and that's fine. But in most cases, big organizations with bigger projects will have data all over the place in separate applications. So you can use service tasks to go and find data and then present it to a user on a user form itself. So for that reason, I use page flows. In my demonstration purposes, it makes it easier because once you've actually created a page flow, you can actually reuse that page flow in many activities, which means is that once you've actually tested your page flow and you use it in different places, that process is always going to be the same and you are going to have much less errors. And you're going to spend much less time to actually create a page flow and reuse it. So it speeds up your development time over a long period of time if you create reusable page flows that you can use from many different places in your solution. So that is more or less my forms project. One other thing that I might want to also mention is I actually have some style sheets. So style sheets you actually use, and you apply that style sheet to a form so that when the form is executed, it actually looks and feels like the organization that you demonstrate for. So as a best practice, what I do is I go and look and see what the organization's website looks like, and I try and simulate the same colors and styles that they use on their websites. That makes it much more easy for people to accept when they actually look at forms, when it actually looks and feels like their own applications that they are used to. So that is my forms package. Thank you very much.